Jake Morrison never thought his biggest career achievement would be successfully operating a screwdriver without causing an interstellar incident. But here he was, 3 months into his assignment as maintenance technician aboard Harmony Station, and his track record of not accidentally destroying critical infrastructure was apparently noteworthy enough to earn him a performance bonus. The irony wasn't lost on him that humanity's first diplomatic outpost looked like a daycare center designed by paranoid architects. Every corner was rounded, every surface was padded, and every tool in his kit had been replaced with what the aliens called human-safe alternatives. His wrench was made of compressed foam. His hammer was basically a pool noodle with delusions of grandeur. "Good morning, Jake," chirped Ambassador Flisbert, bouncing into the maintenance bay like a purple basketball with too much caffeine. Flisbert belonged to the Gellian species, which meant he was basically a sentient blob of jelly, with an infectious optimism that made Disney characters look cynical. "I trust you slept well in your specially reinforced quarters?" "Yeah, about that," Jake said, not looking up from the air recycler he was pretending to fix with his foam tools. The bed collapsed again. Third time this week. Flisbert's entire gelatinous form quivered with what Jake had learned was the Gellian equivalent of nervous laughter. "Oh my, yes, well, we'll have engineering install the Mark 7 reinforced sleeping platform. That should handle your, dynamic sleeping patterns." Dynamic sleeping patterns. That's what they called it when Jake rolled over in his sleep and accidentally crushed furniture rated to support a small spacecraft. The door to the maintenance bay hissed open, and Security Chief Gornock lumbered in. At 8 feet tall, with skin like granite, and a face that looked like it had been carved by someone who'd only heard rocks described secondhand. Gornock was supposedly from one of the galaxy's most feared warrior races. In reality, he had the temperament of a middle manager who'd had his parking space stolen. "Morrison," Gornock growled, his voice like gravel in a blender. "The Council has concerns about your requisition for replacement tools." Jake held up his foam hammer. "This thing couldn't dent butter. Yesterday I spent 4 hours trying to remove a bolt that was hand-tightened by what I can only assume was the galaxy's wimpiest intern." "The tools are designed for your safety," Gornock said, though he couldn't quite meet Jake's eyes. "And the safety of others." "The safety of others? It's a hammer, not a nuclear weapon." Gornock and Flisbert exchanged glances. It was the same look Jake had been seeing a lot lately. The kind of look you'd give a toddler who'd just asked why they couldn't play with the nice sharp knives. "Speaking of safety," Flisbert interjected with forced cheer, "the Council has implemented new cafeteria protocols. From now on, all meals will be pre-cut into bite-sized portions. Even the soup?" "Especially the soup." Jake set down his useless tools and rubbed his temples. "Let me get this straight. You're afraid I'm going to what, weaponize minestrone?" "It's not about weaponizing," Gornock said quickly. "It's about preventing accidents. Last week, Dr. Click calculated that a human jaw can generate enough force to crack trilithium crystals. But I was eating a sandwich." "A very crunchy sandwich," Flisbert added helpfully. Jake looked around the maintenance bay, taking in the padded walls, the rounded edges, the safety warnings posted in 17 different languages and 3 forms of interpretive dance. The largest sign positioned right above his workstation read, "Remember, the human is trying its best to be civilized." "You know what?" Jake said, picking up his foam screwdriver with the resignation of a man who'd accepted his fate. "I'm going to fix this air recycler. Bah. With my baby-safe tools. In my padded room. While being monitored by 17 different sensor arrays designed to make sure I don't accidentally end civilization as we know it." "That's the spirit," Flisbert beamed, literally glowing with bioluminescent approval. As his alien colleagues left him to his dangerous maintenance work, Jake couldn't help but wonder what exactly Earth's diplomatic corps had told these people about humans. Whatever it was, it had clearly given them the impression that humanity was one stubbed toe away from going full berserker mode. If only they knew the truth, Jake thought as he gently tapped a loose connection with his foam hammer. If only they knew that back home, this would be considered the safest job he'd ever had. The access panel should have been routine. According to the station schematics, Panel C-47 was a standard maintenance hatch providing access to the primary atmospheric processing unit. What the schematics didn't mention was that Panel C-47 was apparently made of tissue paper and held in place by good intentions. Jake gave it what he considered a gentle tap with his shoulder, the kind of bump you'd use to close a sticky door. The panel didn't just open. It exploded inward with a sound like a small moon colliding with a larger moon. Chunks of what looked like metallic debris scattered across the corridor, and Jake found himself staring into a room that definitely wasn't supposed to be there. "Ha," he said, examining the twisted remains of what his work order had described as a standard access panel. The metal looked thick enough to stop a tank, and the locking mechanism appeared to have 17 different security features, all of which were now decorating the corridor like expensive confetti. Behind him, someone made a sound like a tea kettle having an existential crisis. Jake turned to find Dr. Click frozen in the hallway, all 6 of his insectoid arms clutched to his thorax, his compound eyes wide enough to reflect the emergency lighting that had started flashing when the panel decided to become abstract art. "Oh, hey, Dr. Click," Jake said casually. "Don't suppose you know why this panel was welded shut? Work order says it should be a standard hatch." Dr. Click's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sound that Jake had learned meant the good doctor was either very excited or very terrified. Given the circumstances, Jake was betting on terrified. That, Dr. Click wheezed, his voice like static electricity with anxiety issues, was a class of security vault. Impenetrium construction. Quantum locks. Molecular bonding fields. Jake looked at the scattered debris, then back at Dr. Click. "Is that good or bad?" Impenetrium is the hardest substance known to galactic science. A single sheet of it can withstand the gravitational force of a collapsing star. The vegan empire uses it to armor their dreadnoughts. "Okay, but is that good or bad?" Dr. Click made that tea kettle sound again, but louder this time. His pen-like manipulator arms were moving frantically over his data pad, taking notes with the fervor of a scientist who just discovered that gravity was optional. "You punched through a class of security vault," Dr. Click whispered, "with your shoulder." "I didn't punch it," Jake protested. "I just gave it a little bump. The thing must have been defective or something." More frantic note-taking. Jake was pretty sure he saw the words casual structural demolition and concerning nonchalance regarding impossible physical feats in Dr. Click's increasingly illegible scrawl. The corridor filled with the sound of approaching footsteps, or in Flisbert's case, approaching bounces. The ambassador arrived first, took one look at the scene, and immediately began vibrating at a frequency that made Jake's teeth itch. "Oh dear," Flisbert said in a voice that was trying very hard to maintain diplomatic composure. "Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear." Gornock arrived moments later, saw the destruction, and went through what Jake could only describe as the 5 stages of grief in fast forward. Denial, this cannot be happening. Anger, how is this happening? Bargaining, perhaps it was a gas leak explosion? Depression, we're all going to die. And finally, acceptance, I need a drink. "It's really not that big a deal," Jake said, which caused Dr. Click to make a noise like a smoke detector with hiccups. "I can probably fix whatever's behind here." What was it securing anyway? The 3 aliens looked at each other, then at Jake, then at the twisted remains of what had apparently been their Fort Knox equivalent. "Emergency chocolate," Flisbert said weakly. "Emergency chocolate?" "For diplomatic crises," Gornock added. "Very important chocolate." Jake peered into the vault and saw what was indeed a small stockpile of various candy bars, each one individually wrapped in what looked like several layers of protective material. "You built a vault that could survive a supernova to protect candy bars?" "Chocolate is very precious," Dr. Click said defensively, though he was still taking notes about Jake's alarming indifference to high-security protocols. "Right," Jake said, stepping over the debris. "Well, the good news is your chocolate is fine. The bad news is you might want to update your security protocols. This door was basically held together with wishful thinking." As Jake walked away, whistling and completely unaware that he'd just casually demolished what 3 separate galactic governments had classified as theoretically impregnable, Dr. Nenor. Click continued his frantic documentation of what he was beginning to suspect might be the most understated security incident in recorded history. Behind them, the emergency lighting continued to flash, as if the station itself was trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. The emergency session of the Harmony Station Council convened exactly 47 minutes after what official reports would later describe as the Chocolate Vault incident. Dr. Frey. Click had used 46 of those minutes to compile what he called preliminary observations regarding human structural interaction capabilities and what everyone else called a list of reasons why we're all probably doomed. "We need to know what we're dealing with," Ambassador Flisbert declared, his gelatinous form shifting between colors like a mood ring, having a nervous breakdown. "If the human can casually demolish impenetrium, what else might it be capable of?" "It has a name," Gornock pointed out. "Jake Morrison." "Right, yes, of course. If Jake can casually demolish impenetrium, what else might Jake be capable of?" Dr. Click's mandibles clicked ominously. "That's what we need to find out. I propose a series of carefully disguised tests, standard station protocols that happen to evaluate human physical parameters, which is how Jake found himself subjected to what had to be the galaxy's most polite interrogation. It started with a routine safety inspection of his quarters. Maintenance Chief Bloop, a sphere-shaped alien who communicated through color changes, rolled into Jake's room with a clipboard and what appeared to be deep existential dread. "Just need to test the structural integrity of your furniture," Bloop explained, his surface shifting from bureaucratic blue to nervous yellow. Jake watched as Bloop produced a device that looked like a tricorder crossed with a panic attack. The device beeped, whistled, and made what sounded like digital weeping as Bloop scanned Jake's repeatedly collapsed bed frame. "Interesting," Bloop muttered, his color cycling through the entire visible spectrum. "The impact damage suggests forces equivalent to a small meteorite strike. Do you perhaps suffer from unusually kinetic dreams?" "I roll over sometimes," Jake said. "Is that a problem?" Bloop's surface went white. In his species, Jake had learned white meant contemplating the heat death of the universe. The tests escalated from there. Dr. Click, under the guise of standard health and safety protocols, convinced Jake to participate in what was supposedly routine physical evaluation procedures. "Just need you to lift this calibration weight," Dr. Click said, indicating what looked like a small engine block. Standard procedure to ensure artificial gravity isn't affecting human physiology. Jake picked up the weight one-handed while checking his phone with the other. "Feels normal to me. What's it supposed to weigh?" Dr. Click consulted his readings, made that tea kettle noise again, and scribbled notes that included the phrases concerning nonchalance and possible violation of local physics. 2,000 standard units, Dr. Click said weakly. "Huh. Feels like maybe 20 pounds. Your gravity might be a little low." More frantic note-taking. Jake was pretty sure he saw Dr. Click reevaluate everything we thought we knew about everything in the margins. The environmental tests were even more concerning. Under the pretense of atmospheric compatibility verification, they subjected Jake to what they described as mildly challenging atmospheric conditions. Jake stood in the testing chamber, breathing comfortably, while the readouts showed atmospheric pressure that would crush most species, the oxygen levels that would cause hallucinations in others, and temperature fluctuations that registered as uninhabitable, on 17 different planetary classification systems. "How are you feeling?" Dr. Click asked through the intercom, his voice tight with scientific panic. "Pretty good," Jake replied. "Reminds me of Colorado in the winter. Maybe a little humid. Maybe a little." Through the observation window, Jake could see Dr. Click frantically updating his notes while Ambassador Flisbert absorbed what appeared to be a small end table in the background. The final test came when Jake casually mentioned his weekend plans. "Oh, I'm thinking of taking a little hiking trip," he said during what Dr. Click had described as a routine psychological evaluation. "Found this great trail system about 50 kilometers north of the station. Supposed to be pretty challenging." Dr. Click looked up from his notes. "Challenging how?" "You know, the usual. Steep climbs, some rock scrambling, maybe a little technical mountaineering. The guide says there's a nice lake at the top where you can swim if you don't mind the cold. Dr. Click's pen stopped moving. What temperature would you consider too cold for swimming? Jake shrugged. I don't know, maybe below freezing? Ice swimming is fun, but it's not really relaxing, you know. Dr. Click made a sound like a computer crashing. His notes from that session would later be classified as a restricted document after 3 different xenobiologists had nervous breakdowns trying to peer review them. By the end of the week, Jake had unwittingly demonstrated that he could lift weights that should require industrial equipment, survive environmental conditions that most species would classify as certain death, and consider recreational activities that sounded like medieval torture methods. Through it all, he maintained the cheerful obliviousness of someone who had no idea that his casual existence was causing multiple species to question their understanding of what was physically possible in a universe governed by rational laws. Dr. Click's final report would be 17 pages long and conclude with the scientific equivalent of "We're going to need a bigger boat." The cultural exchange dinner was supposed to be a triumph of diplomacy. Ambassador Flisbert had spent weeks planning the menu, carefully selecting dishes that would showcase the culinary diversity of the galactic community while remaining safe for human consumption. What he hadn't planned for was Jake Morrison casually destroying 3 centuries of interspecies relations with small talk. It started innocently enough. The dining hall had been decorated with holographic displays showing the homeworlds of various species represented on Harmony Station. Jake found himself seated between Dr. Click and Commander Vex, a crystalline being whose species communicated through harmonic resonance, and who had been looking forward to discussing Earth's presumed atmospheric composition. "Beautiful planet," Commander Vex chimed, his crystal structure ringing like wind chimes as he gestured toward the holographic display of Earth. "Though I confess, our atmospheric analysts found some of the data concerning." Jake looked up from his carefully pre-cut salad. "Concerning how?" Well, Dr. Click interjected, consulting his ever-present data pad. "The oxygen concentration alone registers as highly combustible. 21%? Most species require specialized breathing apparatus to survive in anything above 8%. Jake said, spearing a piece of lettuce with his safety fork. 21% is pretty normal. Gets a little thin up in the mountains, but you adjust. The table went quiet. Through the universal translator, Jake could hear the equivalent of several species simultaneously having the same thought, defying thin. Commander Vex's crystalline form flickered with what Jake had learned was curiosity mixed with existential dread. "And the atmospheric pressure?" "Standard sea level pressure is about 14.7 psi, Jake said. "Why?" Dr. Click dropped his utensil, which was less dramatic than it sounds since his utensil was basically a foam spoon, but the gesture conveyed his shock effectively. 14.7, Dr. Click repeated. "Standard sea level." "Yeah, though it varies depending on weather systems. Low-pressure systems can drop it down a few psi. High-pressure systems can push it up. Makes your ears pop sometimes." The silence stretched long enough for Jake to start wondering if the universal translator had broken. Finally, Ambassador Flisbert spoke up, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by something that looked like diplomatic shock. "Jake," Flisbert said carefully, "when you say standard sea level, you're referring to the surface of your planet's oceans?" "Well, yeah, that's what sea level means." "And you live at this pressure?" "Most people do. Though lots of folks live higher up in the mountains where the air's thinner, or in places like Denver, which is about a mile above sea level." Commander Vex made a sound like crystal glasses falling downstairs. "A mile above sea level? An even thinner atmosphere?" "Sure. Great skiing in Colorado. The altitude takes some getting used to, but it's not that big a deal." Dr. Click was taking notes again, but his usual frantic scribbling had been replaced by the slow, methodical writing of someone documenting their own psychological breakdown. "Jake," Dr. Click said slowly, "what would you consider dangerous atmospheric conditions?" Jake thought about it while chewing his pre-cut vegetables. "I don't know, maybe like the top of Everest? The death zone's pretty rough. Not enough oxygen, extreme cold, that kind of thing. The death zone, Ambassador Flisbert repeated. Yeah, above about 26,000 feet. Called the death zone, because your body literally starts dying from lack of oxygen. People climb it anyway, though. It's like the ultimate hiking challenge. The dining hall had gone completely silent. Even the background hum of the station's life support system seemed muted. People climb it, Commander Vex chimed weakly. For recreation. Well, it's pretty extreme recreation. Most people train for years. You need special equipment, experienced guides, that sort of thing. It's not like a casual weekend hike. Dr. Click's pen had stopped moving entirely. He was staring at Jake with the expression of someone who had just realized that their entire worldview was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of reality. Jake, Dr. Click said in a voice barely above a whisper, what do you consider a casual weekend hike? Oh, maybe 10 or 15 miles through some nice terrain. Nothing too crazy. Maybe a little rock climbing if there are some good cliff faces. Swimming if there's a lake or river. Rock climbing, Ambassador Flisbert said faintly. And swimming, Commander Vex added, his crystal structure flickering erratically. Sure. Great exercise, beautiful scenery. Last weekend I did this great trail that went up about 3,000 feet in elevation. Had to cross a couple of streams that were pretty cold, probably just above freezing, but the swimming was fantastic once you got used to it. Dr. Click made a sound like a computer receiving a logic error. His data pad slipped from his manipulator arms and clattered to the floor. Jake, he said slowly, our database classifies your homeworld as a Class 12 death world. Jake paused mid-chew. Class 12 death world? The highest classification in our system. Reserved for planets where the environmental conditions are so extreme that survival is considered theoretically impossible for most known species. Jake swallowed his salad and looked around the table at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization, all of whom were staring at him with expressions ranging from awe to terror to the kind of existential confusion normally reserved for philosophy students. You classified Earth as a death world, Jake said slowly. The most dangerous category in our system, Dr. Click confirmed. Jake considered this information while reaching for his water glass. And you guys invited us to join your galactic community anyway? We thought, Ambassador Flisbert said weakly, that you were being very brave about living in such horrible conditions. Jake looked at the holographic display of Earth, with its blue oceans and white clouds and green continents, and OS. Then back at the alien representatives who were looking at him like he was a mythical creature who had just casually mentioned that he commuted to work through the fires of hell. We call it home, Jake said simply. And that's when Dr. Click fainted. The news broke across the Galactic Communication Network at 0347 Standard Galactic Time, approximately 18 minutes after Dr. Click's consciousness returned, and he made the professional decision that some discoveries were too important to keep classified. His initial report, filed under Urgent Scientific Update regarding human species classification, was a masterpiece of scientific panic disguised as academic discourse. The key findings were simple enough. Humans weren't just from a death world, they were from the death world. And they considered their hellscape of a planet a nice place to raise kids. By 0400, the report had been forwarded to every major scientific institution in the galaxy. By 0430, it had been leaked to the press. By 0500, financial markets across 17 star systems had collapsed. Jake Morrison, blissfully unaware that his casual mention of weekend hiking had just triggered the galactic equivalent of Black Friday, was back in the maintenance bay trying to fix the air recycler with his phone tools. The fact that he was whistling while he worked probably didn't help his reputation as a terrifying death machine. The first sign that something had gone wrong came when his communication console started flashing with incoming messages. Lots of incoming messages. The message counter quickly scrolled past numbers that Jake was pretty sure weren't supposed to exist. He said, abandoning his futile attempt to remove a bolt with what was essentially a pool noodle. That's weird. Larry. The messages were diverse. The Altarian Commerce Guild wanted to hire him to resolve structural impediments to trade negotiations. The Zexian Military Academy offered him a position as chief instructor of applied impossibility. 3 different species had sent formal surrender documents, apparently just in case. His personal favorite was from something called the Universal Problem-Solving Consortium, which offered to pay him the GDP of a small moon to apply standard human problem resolution techniques to what they described as routine infrastructure challenges. The attached technical specifications suggested that these routine challenges included things like relocating inconveniently positioned asteroid belts and renovating the structural integrity of unstable star systems. Jake was still scrolling through job offers that ranged from lucrative to insane to probably illegal when Ambassador Flisbert bounced into the maintenance bay. The ambassador's usual cheerful purple had been replaced by a color that Jake had never seen before, something between panic yellow and existential crisis green. "Jake," Flisbert said, his voice tight with diplomatic strain, "we need to talk." "Sure thing." "Did you know that the Vorthan Empire wants to pay me to punch a hole through their moon? They say it's for improved mining access, but I'm pretty sure that's not how mining works." Flisbert's color shifted to what Jake was learning was the Gellian equivalent of a migraine. That's actually what we need to discuss. It seems that your cultural exchange dinner comments have had some unintended consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Before Flisbert could answer, the maintenance bay door burst open. Not slid open, not hissed open, but literally burst open as Security Chief Gornock charged through it like a granite avalanche with anxiety issues. "Morrison," Gornock bellowed, his voice echoing off the padded walls. "What did you do?" "I fixed the air recycler," Jake said, pointing to his completely unsuccessful repair work. "Well, I tried to fix it. These phone tools are really not up to the job." "Not the air recycler," Gornock said, waving a data pad that looked absurdly small in his massive hands. "This. In." The data pad displayed what appeared to be a news feed with the headline "Deathworld species rates planetary hellscape is pretty nice, galactic markets in freefall." Jake read the headline twice. "Deathworld species? Are they talking about us?" "The entire galaxy now knows that humans consider a Class 12 death world to be suitable for child rearing," Dr. Click announced as he scuttled into the increasingly crowded maintenance bay. His usual nervous energy had been replaced by the manic intensity of a scientist who had become accidentally famous for discovering that everything he thought he knew was wrong. "Also, Doctor." "No," Click continued, consulting his ever-present notes. 17 different governments have submitted applications to hire you for what they're calling standard human problem-solving services. The Centauri Federation wants you to fix their broken moon. The Rigel Syndicate has offered you a position as their chief impossibility officer. And something called the Emergency Galactic Crisis Management Team has put you on their speed dial. Jake looked around the maintenance bay, taking in the padded walls, the safety warnings, and the phone tools that couldn't cut butter. Then he looked at his alien colleagues, all of whom were staring at him with expressions that suggested they had just realized they had been sharing a space station with what was apparently the galactic equivalent of paying Superman. "So," Jake said slowly, "let me get this straight. You guys think I'm some kind of impossibly powerful super being because I mentioned that I like hiking?" "You casually demolished an impenetrium security vault," Dr. Click pointed out. "You consider atmospheric pressure that would crush most species to be a little thin," Gornock added. "You described recreational activities that our databases classify as certain death scenarios," Flisbert contributed. Jake considered this information while absently bending his phone screwdriver into a pretzel shape. The action was so casual that he didn't even notice the way all 3 aliens took a step back. "Well," Jake said finally, "this is awkward." Outside the maintenance bay, Jake could hear the sounds of increased activity as more alien species arrived at Harmony Station. Some were coming to study him, others to hire him, and a few were apparently coming to surrender preemptively just in case humanity decided to expand beyond their death world and start fixing other people's planets. Meanwhile, the air recycler continued to malfunction, filling the bay with stuffy air that Jake found mildly annoying, but that would probably be classified as a toxic atmosphere by most galactic standards. You guys really need better tools, Jake said, holding up the twisted remains of his foam screwdriver. 6 months later, Jake Morrison sat in what was formerly the maintenance bay and was now officially designated as the office of the Chief Problem Resolution Specialist. The foam tools had been replaced with actual equipment, though Jake suspected that most of it was still designed to be human-safe, which apparently meant rated to survive casual contact with a walking natural disaster. His job description had evolved considerably. Technically, he was still in maintenance, but maintenance now included things like resolve diplomatically challenging engineering obstacles and provide consultation on theoretically impossible infrastructure projects. The pay raise had been substantial, partly because 3 different governments were bidding for his services and then partly because his previous salary had been calculated based on the assumption that he was a fragile creature who needed protection from sharp objects. The door to his office chimed, and Ambassador Flisbert bounced in, his color a much healthier shade of diplomatic blue. The past 6 months had been good for Flisbert's career, being the first ambassador to successfully establish peaceful relations with the Deathworld species. Had earned him several promotions and a commendation from the Galactic Council. Jake, Flisbert said cheerfully, I have your next assignment. Jake looked up from the technical specifications he'd been reviewing. The Andorian Mining Consortium had submitted a request for him to examine an asteroid belt that was inconveniently positioned near their primary shipping lanes. The proposed solution involved Jake physically relocating several billion tons of space rock, which the consortium seemed to think was a reasonable request. Please tell me it's more reasonable than the asteroid thing, Jake said. Well, Flisbert said, his color shifting to diplomatic uncertainty, it's a diplomatic crisis involving the Centauri system. What kind of diplomatic crisis? Flisbert activated a holographic display that showed a star system with what appeared to be a very large problem. One of the stars was flickering erratically, and the gravitational effects were causing havoc with the orbital mechanics of inhabited planets. The star is destabilizing, Flisbert explained. 3 billion inhabitants across 4 worlds are facing imminent evacuation. The Centauri government has tried everything they can think of, but their best scientists estimate it would take 1,000 years and the combined resources of 17 civilizations to stabilize the system. Jake studied the display, noting the gravitational fluctuations and the stellar output variations. It looked like a complex problem, but not impossibly complex. What do they want me to do about it? They want you to fix it. Fix a star. Fix a star. Jake leaned back in his chair, which creaked ominously despite being rated for forces that could theoretically crush a small spacecraft. And they think I can do this because you're human, Flisbert said simply. And in the past 6 months, you've solved 17 problems that our best scientists classified as impossible. The broken moon above Rigel 7, the atmospheric instability on New Geneva, the structural integrity issues with the Vega station. Those weren't impossible, Jake protested. The moon just needed some precision demolition work to relieve geological stress. The atmospheric thing was basically a weather problem. And Vega station was just poor engineering. Whoever designed it clearly didn't account for basic material science. Flisbert's color shifted to what Jake had learned was fond exasperation. Jake, you punched a hole through a moon to prevent seismic catastrophe. You manually adjusted a planet's atmospheric composition. You rebuilt a space station's structural framework using principles that our engineers are still trying to understand. I used a controlled explosion, some basic chemistry, and proper load-bearing calculations, Jake said. It's not like I performed miracles. To us, they were miracles. Jake turned back to the holographic display of the failing star system. 3 billion people facing evacuation because their sun was having what amounted to a cosmic hiccup. The technical specifications suggested it was a complex but solvable problem, assuming you had the right tools and weren't afraid of working in extreme conditions. What kind of timeline are we talking about? Jake asked. The evacuation fleets are already being prepared. Best case scenario, they have maybe 6 months before the system becomes uninhabitable. Jake nodded and made some notes on his datapad. 6 months was tight but doable. He'd need to requisition some specialized equipment. probably coordinate with the local stellar engineering teams, and make sure he packed enough sandwiches for what would likely be a week-long repair job. "I'll take it," he said. Flisbert's color shifted to relieved purple. "Excellent. The Centauri government is prepared to offer substantial compensation for your services. Just make sure they have good coffee," Jake said, "and maybe see if Dr. Click wants to come along. He's been wanting to study stellar mechanics, and this seems like a good learning opportunity." As Flisbert bounced out to make the arrangements, Jake turned back to the technical specifications for star repair. It was definitely going to be more complex than fixing an air recycler. But the basic principles were the same: identify the problem, apply the appropriate solution, and try not to make things worse in the process. Through his office window, Jake could see the steady stream of alien vessels arriving at Harmony Station. Representatives from dozens of species, all coming to consult with humanity's first accidental ambassador to the galaxy. Some came with problems that needed solving, others with opportunities for collaboration, and a few just came to see the legendary Deathworld human in person. Jake had never intended to become the galaxy's go-to problem solver. He'd just wanted to fix air recyclers and maybe earn a decent living. But somewhere along the way, his casual competence at dealing with what other species considered impossible challenges had made him into something between a consultant, a miracle worker, and a walking advertisement for human adaptability. His communication console chimed with another message. This one was from Earth, from the Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs. The message was brief and to the point. "Good work out there, Morrison. Keep it up. Also, we may have forgotten to mention that Earth is classified as a death world. Our bad. Try not to let it go to your head." Jake deleted the message and went back to planning how to fix a star. Just another day at the office for humanity's first cosmic maintenance technician. Outside his window, the galaxy continued to spin, filled with problems that needed solving and people who were just beginning to understand that sometimes the best solutions came from the most unexpected places. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Jake was already wondering what impossible challenge would show up on his desk tomorrow. After all, somebody had to keep the galaxy running, and apparently, that somebody was a guy from Ohio with a foam hammer and a complete inability to understand why everyone else thought his job was impossible.